Most of us take paper currency for granted. They don't tell us in school or in the mainstream media that since money is no longer backed by gold or anything else, it is manipulated in ways to severely penalize anyone who touches the unbacked currency. The term financial repression is sometimes used to describe the losses we all suffer by participating in a managed currency system. The term financial repression refers to the ways in which government and central banks are now extracting wealth and savings and assets from you and I so those institutions can continue their insane levels of debt. Financial repression is right in front of our noses. It's done by primarily two methods. First is inflation, caused by printing money, referred to as quantitative easing. It's nothing but legalized counterfeiting on a mass scale, and laughably, they try to tell us we need it. In the media, they will even try to demonize deflation as some horrible danger. All deflation means is that prices are down and we can afford the things we need for a change. The second method of financial repression is suppression of interest rates, artificially manipulating interest rates down for long periods. You would think the idea with low interest rates is everyone would borrow more. That's not why they lower interest rates. Those financial elites who live on wealth stolen from you and who control interest rates lower those interest rates so they can pay off their debt more cheaply and cheat lenders and investors out of their fair return. These measures are used as a means of vaporizing institutional debt at the expense of savers, investors, and users of currency, you and I. This explains why we are earning practically no interest on our savings and investments. This also explains why prices are continually going up and up and up. We can easily see this in the stores, even though politicians and media pundits are telling us it is not so. These nonsensical government reports of low inflation and low joblessness are pure political propaganda. The numbers reported by government and media are now so cooked, distorted, and outright false that they no longer have any purpose other than to produce mass confusion and public outrage. When government lies, and everybody knows government is lying, and then they go on lying anyway, it suggests a certain amount of desperation. Things are getting out of control, and with the corrupt financial environment on both Wall Street and in government, they are putting the squeeze on us with financial manipulations that should not even be possible, and they are stealing wealth by the trillions with no restraint. In the 100-yard dash, they have shortened their lane to 20 yards. Of course, financial repression has another large component. Taxation rates must be kept very high and rising continually. The idea, after all, is transfer of wealth from the productive economy to the large and non-productive debt-holding institutions such as government and central banks. The levels of institutional debt are now so high that without maximum and increasing levels of wealth extraction from the private sector, government and central banks would simply collapse and cease to exist overnight. This process of wealth extraction will extend for many years because the institutions are always tempted by various political pressures to spend the newly printed money and taxation revenues on things other than debt reduction. The ongoing manipulations are really more of a permanent ball and chain on workers and entrepreneurs than any serious debt reduction effort. Even with the manipulations, institutional debt levels are constantly increasing at faster and faster rates. The fact that debt levels are going out of control, even though they are employing every shady manipulation in the book, is a very scary thing. With debt levels skyrocketing, and no possible means of containing them, it is clear to any rational person that we are headed for economic calamity one way or another, sooner or later. At this point, we are careening toward the edge of a cliff, and we have no brakes. Our federal government alone is carrying $18 trillion or so of debt. That's $55,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. That debt, while going up by $2 trillion a year, is actually being held from becoming even worse by the slow, grinding robbery of every user and holder of currency by taxation, inflation, and low interest rates. One can only assume that the economic pressures will crack wide open before long. Oh, and here's the punchline. That 18 trillion is a small fraction of the full problem. In the financial system, there's also more than $200 trillion in bad loans, worthless derivatives products, and voodoo debt that will lead to systemic default and collapse unless taxpayers and banking customers are brought in to service those obligations. So to get our financial system back on track, you and every other taxpayer are on the hook to pay over $600,000 each. You could pay $2,000 a month for the next 56 years, but that would not cover the debt increases occurring during that 56 years. By the way, while you're trying to pay that down, there's always the high likelihood of another crash, such as happened in 2008, where 45% of the value of private investments nationwide was stolen in a few weeks. By some miracle, trillions of dollars was no longer owed by banks to their investors. It was money that was wiped clean off the liability ledgers of the largest banks. No one can suggest that money was earned or lost. It was stolen. These broad-scale wealth transfers are based on artificial and deliberate currency and interest rate manipulations designed specifically to destroy private wealth and vaporize institutional debt in a one-way, irreversible path, not by earning, but by cheating you. The baby boomers were just too tempting a target. They had accumulated wealth and property for their retirements. That is a huge pot of money which is being taken from them by this scheme. They were told over the years that conservatively they should accumulate enough wealth that 6% interest income would provide for their needs. Then, by suppressing interest rates, that essential retirement income has been taken from the retirees and gifted to large private banks. We haven't seen nominal consumer interest rate yields of 6% since the 1980s. It's no coincidence that when our large institutions find themselves owing a big obligation, they find a way to dodge it. Baby boomers have lost nearly all of the returns on their money by institutional actions that were not accidental or natural. The intended and predictable effect of these policies is to cause retirees to lose all their income and savings by slow attrition. Of course, even younger and more productive people will find it extremely difficult to accumulate and hold wealth and savings under these policies as well. If all of that is not bad enough, the institutional desperation level is about to bring us what is called bail-ins, where money will simply be taken out of your bank accounts and investment accounts, as has already occurred in Europe. Our financial systems are now fully rigged to rob and tax the public for no reason other than to prevent corrupt and failing banks from disappearing and for government waste and excess to grow. By the way, all the banks we are bailing out with our life savings have been convicted and penalized for fraud and various major criminal enterprises committed on a global scale. If you or I did what they have been doing, we would be in prison. While interest earnings on your savings are practically zero, the average citizen must still pay 4% or more on loans, while large institutions pay under 1%, and in some cases pay negative interest rates, meaning that instead of paying interest, bond and treasury markets charge investors to park money there. Again, the term desperation comes to mind. We're watching our country's economic system unravel. The only escape from the losses at this point is for the average person to transfer as much wealth as possible into real assets such as property, physical commodities, precious metals, and reliable and stable alternative currencies which are not subject to volatility and manipulation and not controlled by central authorities. The currencies that best meet those criteria at the present time are Bitcoin and grocery store rewards cards if they have no expiration dates. Investment in land and commodities must be made into the physical object, not certificates of trade, bonds, derivatives, stocks, contracts, investment funds, or promissory notes. In this market, lenders are losers and owners are winners. It is time to move our capital into something very solid. In all the transfers or rollovers that we may undertake to protect ourselves, we face a minefield of hazards. Government and banks are always busy putting toll gates on all the doors. In selecting investments, seek to avoid such costs as taxation, commissions, licensing, service fees, maintenance, depreciation, and market volatility. With all the wolves hiding in the forest, preservation of capital is a high art. So once we have our money protected, how do we know when it's safe to come out again, when the economy is actually improving? That would look like this. You'd see a few good years of no money printing, sharp reductions in taxation, moderate or higher interest rates, an absence of financial crises, drastic reduction in government spending and commitments, no wars or disasters, inflation either non-existent or consistently being canceled by wage increases, elimination of millions of choking regulations, true market innovations leading to true market growth, large capital investments in productive and useful infrastructure, and most of all, Wall Street financial shenanigans completely shut down and replaced by tangible productivity in the commercial, industrial, and technology sectors. If all of that sounds like a frivolous fantasy to you, you're probably right. The only way we might ever see free market forces again would be if we colonize Mars, but I would bet that they would find a way to screw that up too. By looking at the current catastrophic institutional debt levels and propensity of authorities to protect their elite interests at all expense to you and I, we can see that happy economic days are not likely to return for quite a long time, unless the American public woke up and threw a lot of people out of positions of power and control. There are only two likely ways out of the kind of debt that our brilliant elites have now managed to create for us. A long and very painful payback, basically debt slavery forever, or a major default and crash on an international scale that would cause chaos and suffering beyond the average imagination. Whether we are all decimated in a crashing collapse or if we labor in debt servitude forever, the strategies for protecting wealth and earnings now are quite similar. It is to find safe havens for your assets outside the control matrices. The secret is for each of us individually to find answers to the question, how can I protect and keep what I have and what I earn when the powerful elite are desperately trying to take it from me? We must all find our own different ways, because if we all follow the same formula, the powers that be will easily set up their toll gates. They'll change the rules and help themselves to our worth and holdings. In this economy and political system, it is truly every man for himself. Every person who wishes to survive must, on their own, find a seat on a lifeboat.